Hi, I'm Glenn Hughes.
And I'm Ed Buzio.
For 3 decades, I've been working inside a publicly traded company.
And for over a decade, I've been an entrepreneur supporting companies like Glenn's from the outside.
In this series, we look at the problems and challenges of the modern workplace
and provide our ideas and advice
from the inside
and out. So last week, I got an interesting question from a manager. I thought I'd ask you, Glenn. Is it okay to be an asshole if I get my work done?
That didn't come from one of my employees?
He wasn't talking about you, at least.
Okay, good. I'm going to take, this is an easy one to both say no to, and I'm going to take the yes. I'm going to say sometimes you will need to exhibit behavior that some people will perceive as being an asshole.
Because there's a continuum from very assertive behavior to very passive behavior, and actually people that live on the very passive side will perceive even moderately assertive behavior as the negative asshole. Is that kind of your point?
I'm going to let you answer all my questions from now on. That was better than I could have said it. Yes, exactly. There's a continuum, and sometimes you're going to be the carrot, and sometimes you're going to be the stick. And I think depending on context, time, approach, in the moment, and our own internal barometer being very different from your internal barometer, I may think I'm on this side of the a-hole line, but you've moved the line. And so unknowingly, I've done something, sometimes knowingly.
Now what about, I mean, we're sitting here kind of chatting, but people will say, you know, you don't live in the reality of my world. Like we have deadlines every week, the pressure is never off, it hasn't been off for years, we keep cutting staff, do more with less, all that. And the only way I can get what I need to get out of my team so I don't lose my job and they don't lose their salaries is for me to basically beat them up, more or less, verbally. What do you say to that? Because I know what I say to that. But
you've got the wrong team.
Or the wrong job.
Exactly. I don't know why you would ever be in a role where you have to yell at people to get things done. Yelling implies they have the capability to get it done. And so clearly Darth Vader and Kylo Ren were able to walk in and make things happen by waving around a lightsaber. Okay, but that meant the capability was already there, right? So what's in the way of that? I'd rather be an engineer than a slave driver. So,
well, and me too, because a slave driver is not a very good use of my time. If I have to put a gun at your head and watch everything you do, that's my job, is to put a gun to your head and watch everything you do. I can't do anything else. But one of the things that we do in our culture work is we look at 3 important aspects of what an employee has from a manager perspective. The first is a clear understanding of their output. The second is self-managed feedback. Do you know what you're doing without me telling you? And the third is access to resources without my approval. So one of the things that I have to say about the a-hole thing is if you have to be an a-hole to keep shoving them, I want to know, do your employees know what's expected of them? Do they have the ability to check themselves if they're doing it or not? And do they have the resources they need without you being involved? Because if they don't have those 3 things, go work on that and quit yelling.
Let me come back to the pro-a-hole approach. One of the most important roles of a manager, mentor, or coach is to hold up a mirror to the employee. I have a view of you that you don't have. And I should not only be willing, I'm obligated to share that perspective with you when it's appropriate and helpful. And sometimes that mirror that I hold up to what's going on in your world and how I think you're managing your time, managing your relationships, and managing the work in front of you is sometimes that mirror is going to be blunt and ugly and something you don't want to hear. And frankly, the longer I wait, probably the more blunt, the more ugly, and the less you want to hear it. So sometimes our desire to be nice all the way up to the front, and then we hold up the mirror and say, you're messing up, I don't think you're pushing the customer hard enough, and X, Y, and Z. You'll be, I can't believe he told me that. What a a-hole, right? Or I can't believe he did it in that place, or I can't believe he did it in that way.
But that's very different from over the long term being sort of a-hole-ish, which
right.
is to say being overly assertive, being disinterested in listening, all these sort of stereotypical characteristics, because most managers anyway are playing a long-term game. And maybe you can get everything you need with the gun to the head in the short term, but you're going to turn your back eventually. You're going to need them for something above and beyond eventually, and if you haven't built a real relationship and a real connection, you're going to have a hard time with that. So if you are a real manager, meaning your job is to obtain their output, then your success is dependent on their output. Having them hate you, not necessarily the best strategy.
It's not sustainable. I mean, and that's what we're really coming down to, is if you're using your a-holeness as we're inventing a whole bunch of new words here. If you're using your a-holeness as a strategic surgical strike to make things happen in the short term, and they get results in that short term, that's probably a good thing. But if your overall strategy is I'll be a jerk and inspire fear all the time, that's not sustainable. We've never seen a business model where that worked over time.
It can't be the only tool in your bag of tricks. It shouldn't even be the one you use the most often. It sort of reminds me of the thing we both know from teaching in a class, which is when someone's exhibiting bad behavior if they're talking, you start by sort of looking at them across the room, and then you sort of move a little closer, and then you kind of put your hand on them, and you work your way up. So eventually you can throw somebody out of the room, but it's a very small percentage. I think this is like that. Eventually you can go to a-hole if you need to, but it's a very small percentage with a specific reason, and because you tried other things. That was my answer to this manager, and I think that's my answer. So what's your answer? When is it okay to be an a-hole, and when is it not okay?